the neon glow of La Belle Étoile, our upscale French restaurant, flickered against the wet pavement as I locked the doors for the night. It was nearing midnight, the usual hour when Sophia, my wife and business partner, was supposedly meeting suppliers. She'd left earlier that evening, her high heels clicking against the tile floor as she brushed past me. Her smile a little too sweet, her excuse rehearsed. "Don't wait up," she said, throwing her scarf around her neck in a practiced flourish. This one might take a while. The air had been heavy with her familiar perfume, but it didn't carry the comfort it once did. Lately, everything about her felt like theater. Her words scripted, her movements calculated, her drive off in the sleek black sedan I bought her last year, the taillights disappearing into the distance. I wasn't buying the act anymore. In the dim kitchen of the restaurant, the stainless steel counters gleamed under the fluorescent light. This place had been our dream, a partnership built on love and a shared passion for food. But cracks were showing. Cracks, she thought. I couldn't see. The late-night supplier meetings, the hushed phone calls, the way she avoided eye contact when I asked how her day had gone. The staff had noticed too. Marco, my sous chef, had been the first to tip me off. "She's been sneaking out a lot, boss," he muttered one evening as we closed up, always on the phone, laughing. "It's not about work, trust me." I brushed it off at first, but the seed of doubt had taken root. Tonight, I finally decided to act. Sophia's behavior over the last few months had become a puzzle, and I intended to piece it together. Heading home, I sifted through the pile of invoices in her office, my fingers moving quickly but carefully. Something had to be here, a clue, a connection. I found a receipt for an upscale restaurant across town, Le Ciel, a place owned by Antoine Moreau, our biggest rival. I stared at the receipt for a long moment. What possible supplier meeting could take place at Le Ciel? My gut churned as the pieces began to fall into place. At 1:00 a.m., I sat parked in the shadows across from our home, the engine of my truck idling quietly. Her sedan wasn't in the driveway. This time I didn't plan to wait and wonder. I pulled out my phone, dialed her number and waited. It rang twice before going to voicemail. Lying bitch. I turned off the engine and decided to head back toward town. If she thought she could sneak around behind my back, she was about to learn she wasn't as clever as she thought. I spotted her car, parked discreetly behind Le Ciel, tucked into a dim corner where no one would notice. My heart thudded as I stepped out of the truck. Thiefy, cold night air biting at my skin. The alley smelled of rain and rotting food. But I didn't care. I edged closer to the back door, its faint glow casting eerie shadows on the cobblestones. Through a crack in the door, I could see into the kitchen, a polished, sterile room bathed in golden light. Sophia stood there, laughing softly, a glass of wine in her hand. Across from her was Antoine Moreau, his sleeves rolled up, leaning far too close for comfort. Their voices drifted toward me, muffled but distinct. "You're incredible, Sophia," Antoine said, his tone oozing with charm. "If only I'd met you first." She laughed, tilting her head back in a way that made my blood boil. "Stop, Antoine. You'll make me blush." I gripped the edge of the door frame, the wood splintering under my fingers. They didn't notice. "It's a shame you're wasted on him," Antoine continued. "A man like that doesn't appreciate what he has." Her response was sharper, almost dismissive. "It's not about appreciation. It's about control. He thinks he owns me, but he doesn't, not anymore." The wine glass clinked as she set it down then. As if to twist the knife, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. In my truck, I sat in the darkness, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The image of her with Antoine played on a loop in my head. This wasn't just infidelity. It was betrayal on every level. She wasn't just infidelity. Sleeping with him, she was conspiring, mocking me. And for what? To hand over everything we built. The backstabbing bastard could have her, but I wasn't going to let them take the restaurant or walk away unscathed. This was war. The rain was still falling as I parked a block away from Le Ciel the next evening, my truck blending into the evening shadows. Sophia had told me she'd be working late again, finalizing an order for fresh truffles. Her lie was so smooth, so casual, that it might have worked if I hadn't already known the truth. I wasn't here to confront her. Not yet. I wanted proof, undeniable, irrefutable evidence that would paint her and Antoine for what they were. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about survival. I spotted her car again, parked in the same hidden corner behind Lacey. I slipped into the alley, hugging the wall, keeping to the shadows as I moved closer to the restaurant's rear entrance. The soft murmur of voices drifted out from the open kitchen door. I crouched low, peering through the crack. Sophia sat perched on a stool, her legs crossed, her skirt hiked just high enough to reveal intentions far from professional. Antoine leaned against the counter across from her, holding a glass of red wine in one hand, a sheath of papers in the other. "What's this?" Sophia asked, her voice teasing. She reached out, brushing her fingers over the papers. "The new menu," Antoine replied. "Inspired by your suggestions," he smirked, his eyes lingering on her in a way that made me want to smash the glass against his face. Sophia took the papers, flipping through them. I caught a glimpse of the bold handwritten titles. Filet de sole aux herbes, duck confit with blood orange reduction. My recipes I'd spent years perfecting, stolen and rebranded under Antoine's pretentious banner. "You're really going to use these?" she asked, feigning modesty. "They'll make Lucille the talk of the city," he said confidently, his gaze dropping to her legs. "And you, my dear, will be the secret to my success." Sophia leaned forward, lowering her voice to a whisper I could barely catch. "You just have to promise me one thing." "Anything," Antoine said, stepping closer. "Make sure Victor never finds out." The bastard chuckled. "Victor? That brute? Don't worry about him. He doesn't strike me as the type to notice subtlety." My fist clenched. Subtlety wasn't my strong suit, but retribution would be. After they retreated to Antoine's office, I slipped into the kitchen. It was silent now, the faint hum of the refrigerator masking my movements. My eyes scanned the room, landing on the stack of papers they'd left behind. I shuffled through them quickly, confirming what I already knew. Not only had she stolen my recipes, but she'd made notes, adjustments meant to fit Antoine's presentation style. My handwriting had been replaced with hers, as if my work was nothing more than a stepping stone for her deceit. I stuffed the papers into my jacket pocket and moved toward the office door. Low voices filtered through, punctuated by soft laughter and the clink of glasses. I pressed my ear against the door, my pulse quickening as I caught the tail end of their conversation. "I'll make it worth your while," Sophia purred. "Oh, you already have," Antoine replied. The sound of a chair scraping the floor was followed by something far less professional. The muffled rustle of fabric, a soft moan. I didn't need to see it. I'd seen enough. Back home. I didn't need to see it. Poured myself a stiff drink and sat in the darkened kitchen. The stack of stolen recipes spread across the table in front of me. My rage was a low, steady burn now. Focused and controlled, I could have confronted her when she got home. Demanded an explanation, but I wanted her to keep digging her own grave. Sophia didn't stumble in until 1:0 a.m. Her perfume a little too strong, her hair tousled in a way that screamed impropriety. She slipped off her heels at the door, barely noticing me as she padded toward the stairs. "Long night?" I asked, my voice calm, even. She froze mid-step, her back to me. "Oh, you're still up." "Yeah," I said, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "The supplier ran late." "Funny," I said, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. I didn't know Antoine Moreau was in the truffle business. Her body stiffened, but she quickly recovered, turning to face me with a forced laugh. "What are you talking about?" I stood, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her eyes darted to the stack of papers on the table, her expression faltering for the briefest second before she plastered on that same sweet smile. "You've got it all wrong, Victor," she said, stepping closer. "It's not what you think." I grabbed the papers and slammed them down on the table between us. "Then explain these," I growled. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I didn't give her the chance to lie again. "I know everything, Sophia. The recipes, the affair, the meetings with that piece of shit. Don't insult me with your excuses." Her eyes widened, but instead of fear or remorse, I saw something else. Defiance. "You don't understand," she said, her voice sharpening. "Antoine sees my potential. He values me in ways you never could." I laughed, cold and humorless. "He values you. He's using you, Sophia. Just like you're using him." Her jaw tightened, her mask slipping. You don't get it, Victor. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about me, my career, my future, your future. I stepped closer, my voice dropping. Your future is a damn fantasy if you think you can steal from me and get away with it. Her lips parted, but whatever retort she had died in her throat. I leaned in, my face inches from hers. This isn't over, Sophia. Not by a long shot. The air between us crackled with tension as I turned and stormed out, leaving her standing there, her lies hanging heavy in the room. The morning after our confrontation, Sophia acted as if nothing had happened. She flitted around the kitchen in a silk robe, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. It was a performance, carefully calibrated to test me. If she thought I'd back down, she was sorely mistaken. I stayed quiet, eating my breakfast slowly, studying her. She glanced at me occasionally, her expression unreadable, but she didn't say a word about the previous night. I could feel the tension simmering beneath her polished exterior. Late night tonight, I asked casually, breaking the silence. She didn't flinch, didn't even look up. Probably, we've got another supplier meeting, I smiled to myself. She really thought she could lie her way out of this. Once Sophia left for work, I wasted no time. I rummaged through her desk in the study, my hands moving swiftly through drawers and folders. Her meticulous organization worked against her now. Everything was perfectly labeled, easy to navigate. And there it was, an envelope stuffed between business receipts. Inside, I found copies of our recipes, the same ones Antoine had presented as his own. But there was more. Plane tickets, hotel reservations, a neatly typed itinerary for a weekend in Paris, Antoine's name listed alongside hers. I felt my stomach twist, not with sadness, but with rage. She wasn't just cheating on me physically, she was cheating me out of our livelihood, our dreams. At the bottom of the drawer, I found her phone's backup drive. Didn't hesitate plugging it into my laptop. I sifted through weeks of messages, emails, and photos. Her texts to Antoine were brazen. Plans for secret dinners, whispered jokes about my obliviousness, even explicit photos she'd sent him. One message hit me harder than the others. Once the recipes are finalized, we can push Victor out completely. He'll be forced to sell the restaurant, and then it's all ours. That night, I waited in the shadows of the kitchen, the house quiet. Around me, Sophia breezed in around 11:30 p.m., her perfume stronger than usual, her cheeks flushed. She froze when she saw me sitting there, her smile faltering. "You're still up?" she asked, feigning casualness. "Of course," I said, my voice calm. "I couldn't sleep, too much on my mind." She hesitated, then poured herself a glass of wine and joined me at the table. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone syrupy sweet. I slid the envelope across the table toward her. "What's this?" she asked, her eyes narrowing as she opened it. She froze, her expression turning cold as she sifted through the stolen recipes and travel plans. "You've been snooping," she said, her voice icy. "No," I replied, leaning forward. "I've been uncovering the truth. You're not just cheating on me, Sophia. You're trying to destroy me, to take everything we've built and hand it over to that slimy bastard." Her mask cracked, and she slammed the envelope onto the table. "You're so dramatic, Victor. You think this place is all about you? I've sacrificed just as much, if not more, and now I'm finally getting the recognition I deserve. By selling me out, by stealing from me." "Don't be naive," she spat. "It's business. Antoine understands my value. Unlike you, your value." I laughed darkly. "Your value is in your lies, your betrayal. You think Antoine gives a damn about you. He's using you to get to me." Her face twisted in anger, but I didn't stop. "You've always been good at playing the victim, Sophia. But this time you picked the wrong man to screw over." After Sophia stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, I got to work. First, I accessed our recipe files and swapped the originals for altered version. Subtle changes that would turn Antoine's culinary showcase into a disaster. Too much salt in the sauces, missing emulsifiers, and then I swapped ingredients that would result in unpalatable textures. Next, I backed up every damning piece of evidence I had on her and Antoine. The messages, the photos, the stolen recipes. Then, I contacted our lawyer and instructed him to prepare divorce papers, ensuring the restaurant would remain mine. Finally, I called in a favor from an old friend in the culinary world, a well-connected food critic who owed me more than a few favors. Woke up, leaving no note, no text. I didn't care. The groundwork was set. By the time Antoine's restaurant announced its exclusive tasting event for the weekend, the pieces were in motion. The critic confirmed he'd be attending alongside several other influential figures in the culinary world. I poured myself a coffee, a smile creeping across my face as I pictured the chaos that awaited them. Let her and Antoine think they'd won. They wouldn't see the fallout coming. They wouldn't see the fallout coming. Exterior of Lo Seal glowed under golden spotlights, the front entrance flanked by an eager line of patrons and culinary critics. Inside, Antoine's signature charm was on full display as he glided between tables, shaking hands and basking in the anticipation of his latest menu debut. Sophia was there too, perched near the bar in a low-cut black dress, a glass of wine in hand. Her laugh echoed across the room, brittle and forced. I stayed in the shadows, seated at the farthest corner of the dining area, a glass of scotch in front of me. They hadn't seen me yet. I wanted to be a silent witness when the chaos erupted. The tasting menu had been hyped for weeks, an ambitious blend of French classics reinvented for a modern palette. What the diners didn't know was that every dish had been sabotaged, every recipe carefully altered to implode under the bright scrutiny of the culinary elite. The first course arrived, filet de sole aux herbes, Antoine's supposed reinvention of a classic. Plates were set down with flourish, each adorned with wilted herbs and an over-salted sauce that clung to the fish like glue. The initial bites were met with polite murmurs, but the subtle grimaces were unmistakable. Critic at the next table leaned toward his companion, whispering, "It's overly salted." Amateur mistake. Antoine hovered nearby, oblivious to the growing discomfort. Sophia, seated at his table now, beamed at him like a trophy wife basking in stolen glory. The second course, duck confit with blood orange reduction, hit the tables. The saucy, intentionally tweaked to include a high-acid content, overwhelmed the duck entirely, leaving an acrid aftertaste that caused several diners to set down their forks. A man 2 tables over waved down a waiter. "Excuse me, but is this the intended flavor profile? It's quite harsh." The waiter froze, glancing toward Antoine, who had begun to notice the subtle ripples of dissatisfaction spreading through the dining room. The main course was the death knell, beef Wellington with truffle demi-glace. The pastry had been adjusted to collapse in the oven, leaving the dish soggy and unappetizing. The truffle sauce was cloyingly rich and an insult to the delicate balance the dish required. This time, the whispers turned to outright complaints. A Farai, renowned food blogger, stood, his voice carrying through the room. "I was promised innovation, but this is an insult to French cuisine. What kind of chef serves this?" Antoine's face, once smug and confident, paled as he scanned the room. Diners began exchanging glances, murmuring among themselves. Sophia, seated at his table, looked equally stunned, her polished facade slipping as she realized the evening was unraveling. I couldn't resist any longer. I rose from my seat, sauntering toward their table. The room was buzzing with discontent now. Diners leaving plates untouched, critics scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Antoine noticed me. First, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low and tense. Sophia turned, her eyes widening when she saw me. "Victor," I cut her off with a smile, cold and sharp. "Lovely evening, isn't it? Quite the showcase of culinary talent." I gestured toward a nearby table where a critic was openly berating a waiter. "Get out," Antoine hissed, his composure fracturing. But I wasn't done. "Why would I leave? I'm invested in this event, after all. It's my recipes that brought you here, aren't they?" Sophia's face drained of color, her hand gripping the edge of the table. "Victor, don't," she started. But I ignored her. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Did you really think you could steal from me and get away with it? Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Antoine's hand tightened on his wine glass, but he said nothing. "Enjoy the fallout," I said, my voice rising enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Your reputation, your career, it all ends tonight." I turned to Sophia, leaning in close enough that only she could hear. "And as for you, you're coming home to an empty house. Back at home." I poured another drink and waited. Sophia burst through the door an hour later, her heels clicking against the floor, her face flushed with rage. "You ruined everything," she screamed, slamming her purse onto the counter. "No, Sophia," I said calmly, swirling the scotch in my glass. "You ruined everything. I just made sure the world saw it." She stormed toward me, her hands trembling. "You've destroyed toward me. You've destroyed Antoine's career. Do you know what you've done?" I stood, towering over her, my voice low and deadly. "I've taken back what's mine. You should have thought about that before you tried to stab me in the back." Her lip quivered, but her defiance flared. "You're a monster." I smiled. "No, Sophia. I'm a man who doesn't lose. Pack your things. You're out." Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw fear flicker across her face. She opened her mouth to argue, but I silenced her with a raised hand. "File for divorce. The papers are on the desk. Take a good look. By the time you're done, I want you gone." She stared at me, her defiance crumbling, and for the first time she was silent. The night of the Culinary Excellence Awards was abuzz with chatter, the air thick with anticipation. The city's top chefs, critics and investors gathered in the grand ballroom of the Chateau Lumiere, its gilded chandeliers casting warm light over the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. This was the event where reputations were cemented or destroyed. Sophia and Antoine arrived together, arm in arm, their smiles as polished as their outfits. She wore a deep red gown, a bold choice meant to draw every eye in the room, while Antoine looked every bit the part of the arrogant maestro, his tailored suit screaming wealth and power. They hadn't spotted me yet. I preferred it that way. I stood near the back, my presence unnoticed as I watched them mingle. Sophia threw her head back, in laughter at Antoine's jokes, her hands brushing his arm as if the past week's disaster hadn't shaken her confidence. If anything, they seemed more determined to double down on their charade. But tonight wasn't about whispers or stolen glances. Tonight, the truth would roar. As the ceremony began, I took my place at a reserved table near the stage. My lawyer seated beside me, a thick folder resting on his lap. Sophia noticed me then, her eyes narrowing slightly before she nudged Antoine, whispering something in his ear. He glanced in my direction, his smug expression faltering for a brief moment before he masked it with indifference. The awards proceeded as expected. Applause, acceptance speeches, and the dull monotony of predictable winners. But as the final award of the night approached, the energy in the room shifted. This was the big one. Chef of the Year, the crown jewel for anyone in the culinary world. The host took the stage, his voice booming through the microphone. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. The nominees for Chef of the Year are... Antoine's name was announced first, met with polite applause and a few scattered cheers. He stood, bowing slightly. His stood, bowing slightly. Practice grinned firmly in place. Sophia clapped enthusiastically, her eyes darting toward me as if daring me to react. The room erupted in applause as Antoine rose from his seat, buttoning his jacket and striding confidently toward the stage. Sophia followed him with her gaze, her smile widening. Antoine stood at the podium, basking in the applause as he adjusted the microphone. "Thank you," he began, his voice smooth and practiced. "It's an honor to be recognized for my contributions to the culinary arts. This award isn't just for me. It's for my incredible team, my staff, and of course, the woman who has been my inspiration." He gestured toward Sophia, who blushed and nodded as if the entire room should envy her. I decided it was time. I rose from my seat, carrying the folder my lawyer had handed me earlier, approaching the stage and hesitated, unsure of what to do. Antoine's smile faltered as I climbed the stairs and stood beside him. "What are you doing, Victor?" he hissed under his breath, his confidence slipping. I took the microphone from his hands, my voice steady and deliberate. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but there's something you all need to know before this award is finalized." The room fell silent, the tension evident. You see, Antoine Moreau isn't the visionary chef you all believe him to be. His so-called brilliance, his innovative recipes, they're not his. They were stolen. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by murmurs of disbelief. Sophia's face drained of color as she leaned forward in her seat, her expression a mix of shock and fury. I held up the folder. "These are the original recipes, created and perfected by me long before Antoine ever laid eyes on them. And these," I said, pulling out a stack of printed emails, are the proof of the theft, orchestrated with the help of my wife, Sophia. The crowd erupted, journalists scrambling too, their feet cameras flashing. Antoine stepped forward, his composure cracking. "This is absurd. You have no evidence." I cut him off, handing the documents to the host. "Everything you need is here. Emails, recipe drafts, even the flight itinerary for their little getaway to Paris. It's all there." The host glanced at the papers, his expression darkening as he read. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice tight, "it appears we need to review this matter further. Until then, this award is rescinded." The audience erupted into chaos, some booing, others shouting questions. Antoine turned to me, his face twisted with rage. "You think this will ruin me?" He snarled. I smiled coldly. "It already has." Sophia cornered me in the lobby after the event, her hands trembling with fury. "You couldn't just let it go, could you?" she spat. "You had to humiliate me in front of everyone." I stepped closer, my voice low and menacing. "You humiliated yourself, Sophia. You thought you could steal from me, destroy what I built, and walk away unscathed. That's not how this works." Tears brimmed in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. "Enjoy your life with Antoine," I said, my tone cutting, "but don't expect to rise from the ashes I leave behind." As I walked away, her voice cracked behind me. "You'll regret this, Victor." I didn't look back. The world now knew who she really was, and the empire she tried to build with Antoine was already crumbling. The next morning, the fallout from the Culinary Excellence Awards was splashed across every newspaper and blog in the city. Headlines like Chef of the Year, exposed as a fraud and recipe theft scandal, rocks. Culinary World dominated the media. Antoine's smug grin had been replaced by a candid shot of his pale, sweaty face from the stage as the truth unraveled. As for Sophia, her name was dragged through the mud alongside his, her carefully curated reputation shredded by whispers of betrayal and deceit. Messages poured into the restaurant's inbox, most of them from outraged colleagues or gleeful rivals reveling in the scandal. But La Belle Étoile remained untouched. 2 weeks later, Sophia was gone. The divorce papers, finalized with brutal efficiency, had stripped her of any claim to the restaurant or our shared assets. She tried to fight it, of course, claiming she was owed a share of the business, but my lawyer had been ruthless. The evidence of her theft and affair had left her with nothing. I heard she moved in with Antoine, though their arrangement didn't last long. With his reputation in tatters, Lucille closed within days. Investors pulled out, critics boycotted him, and customers vanished on him. And now she was left with nothing but a tarnished name. Back at La Belle Étoile, the restaurant was undergoing a transformation. The walls were repainted, the menu revamped, and the branding reimagined. Gone was the old name that carried the baggage of Sophia's betrayal. In its place stood Savage Flame. Unapologetic homage to resilience and reinvention. I worked tirelessly, staying late into the night to oversee every detail. Marco, my sous chef, had stepped up, proving himself indispensable. Together we experimented in the kitchen, crafting dishes that were daring and provocative, food that challenged conventions and made a statement. On grand reopening night, the restaurant was packed, the hum of conversation filling the air as plates of bold, fiery creations were carried to eager diners. The centerpiece of the menu was my newest dish, La Vengeance, a seared lamb loin with smoked chili glaze, and a side of charred vegetables. It was a symbol of triumph, of reclaiming what had been stolen and transforming it into something greater. Critics who had shunned Antoine flocked to Savage Flame, curious to see how I'd risen from the ashes. They weren't disappointed. Their glowing reviews painted a picture of a man who'd faced betrayal and emerged stronger, sharper, and emerged stronger, utterly uncompromising. Near midnight, I stood at the edge of the kitchen, watching the last few tables finish their meal. The energy of the night was electric, but I felt calm, grounded. For the first time in months, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Marco approached, wiping his hands on his apron. "Full house tonight, boss? That's gotta feel good." I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. "It does, but this is just the beginning." He grinned, clapping me on that. shoulder before heading back to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of bourbon, stepping outside into the cool night air. The neon sign for Savage Flame glowed above me, a beacon of my victory. As I sipped my drink, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Sophia and Antoine were nothing more than ghosts now, their betrayal a distant memory. I wasn't the same man I'd been before. I was sharper, colder, and more focused. The fire they tried to extinguish had only made me burn brighter. And as the night settled around me, I raised my glass to the sign above, to new beginnings, and with that, I stepped back inside, ready to conquer whatever came next. Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters, and trust me, thiefy next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.